The music's on, the disco ball has dropped, and it's time to get this party started. You're listening to episode 35 of DiscoTrek, a Star Trek Discovery after party podcast here on the Tricorder Transmissions Network. I'm your host, Heather Barker, and with me, as always, is my most favorite, Jeff. Welcome, Jeff Hewlett.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing all right. I am excited to talk about this episode, especially with our fellow guests.
Yes. It's going to be a fun one. I'm looking forward to this.
It's going to be super fun. So for those who aren't familiar with the show, we're a community-based Star Trek podcast featuring on each... Let me just start that over. For those who aren't familiar with the podcast, we're a community-based Star Trek podcast focused on all episodes of Star Trek Discovery as they air. Tonight, we're discussing episode 7, Light and Shadow. It was episode 7, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, correct.
Okay, because I have episode 4 left over in my notes from forever. With us to talk about the episodes are not only two members of the unofficial Star Trek Las Vegas convention group on Facebook, which is the way to get on the show for now, but they are also Tricorder Transmissions family. Our most favorite, Marina Kravchuk, is one of the hosts of Shore Leave and has been on like all of our shows at this point, I think. So welcome, Marina.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me.
We are super excited, and I will let you know right now there are 149 days until STLV. Lots of planning already, and I think you guys just did a recap of the cruise, it sounded like.
Right.
And now the next cruise is sold out a year in advance.
Almost exactly. I believe the admin of one of the fan groups on Facebook that is actually ECP, the company that hosts the cruise, actually keeps track of what's going on. I think they probably get some hints on probably which way to do, maybe add certain things and everything. But the admins are actually in contact with them, and they confirmed on, which was I think about 2 or 3 days ago, that yes, it's officially sold out. I think all the cabins except for one. Actually, I suppose at this point, all of them are waitlisted completely as well. So we still have an entire year to go. Chances are there will be cancellations, transfers, whatever. So those people who are on the waitlist probably shouldn't despair completely, because there is a chance they might be contacted at some point saying, we had a cancellation. Would you like the spot? But it's a year out, and it's super exciting. I don't believe this happened before.
No, this is brand new. So if I win the lottery, I may still have a very slim chance of going to STLV on the sea.
That would be fantastic, because it sounds like it's going to be one hell of a party.
Well, I will listen to the cruise Shore Leave and find out all about it. Our other host is also dear family. He is the host of Weekly Trek. He's doing amazing things with the news in just 30 minutes. It's pretty awesome. Welcome back, Alex.
Thank you, Heather. Glad to be here.
It's been only a few weeks since we've had you on the show in one way or another, as you have filled in for both Jeff and I.
Yes.
I know. I think this is my 4th DiscoTrek of the season so far.
It is. You're the official fill-in for both of us.
I am a big fan of Alex's canon connections over on TrekCore, so I am always excited when we can have Mr. Alex Perry on the show.
Very much so.
Yes.
Actually, I managed to add more fans to, well, specifically of TrekCore, because apparently there are out there some Trek fans who are not aware that there is such a wonderful source of pretty much anything Trek out there. And I was surprised. I was like, of course you have to keep track. Look at all this amazing stuff that's popping up.
Well, we appreciate you proselytizing, Marina. Carry on.
Spread the gospel of TrekCore to the Trekkies of the land. Okay, we're going to hop into our discussion of the episode just a minute, but first we have some announcements from the DJs. That's Jeff and me. Sorry, I'm just being silly now because I haven't read that in forever.
That was good.
You could do what you want with that. As we mentioned, DiscoTrek is community-focused and evolved from our desire to give fans and our convention community a way to talk about Discovery. To enter for your chance to join us, make sure you're a member of the unofficial Star Trek Las Vegas convention group on Facebook. You also might want to follow us on Twitter. We're at disco_trek. I will post to there looking for guests as well. But right now, once you join the group, you'll see a new post every week with the DiscoTrek art and information on the following week's recording time. Just comment on that post to be entered, and we'll use a random generator to pick 2 winners, typically on Saturday, and then we record on Sunday. So we have 2 options to still talk about Discovery if you don't make it on the show. One is to look for the spoiler-free and then spoilery post in the unofficial STLV group that pops up typically the night of or day after the episode. And then we also have a phone number that you can call. Jeff, did you remember the phone number?
Yeah, it is 609-527-LLAP.
Very, very nice. And then there's also a SpeakPipe tab on our website that you can call and leave a voicemail as well.
From any device.
Yes, from any device. Moving forward, we're actually going to be changing some of the rules for the show. Like once you've been on the podcast, you can enter again. You just can't be on the podcast 2 weeks in a row. And we do still give new people variety because we really wanted to give everyone access to have a voice about Discovery.
Mm-hmm.
But keep an eye on our posts. We'll explain a little bit more of that in the future. In the meantime, we do have another very great way you can support our network. Jeff, why don't you tell everyone about Patreon?
Of course. So yes, we do have a Patreon page, and recently our Patreon has gotten much, much, much more interesting thanks to our new tier system that I'll talk about in 1 second. You can find it at www.patreon.com/the-tricorder-transmissions, or you can visit our website, thetricordertransmissions.com, and click on the orange Patreon link in the upper right-hand corner of the main page. So if you enjoy what we do here on DiscoTrek or any of our other Tricorder Transmission shows, please consider joining our Patreon family. So becoming a patron at any level will give you instant access to unedited and early release episodes that often contain bonus material before and after. This episode that you're listening to right now will be available on Patreon right after we're done recording it. So it'll be completely raw audio, so you can hear all kinds of stuff before and after the show. But like I said before, we have just added a bunch of new tiers ranging from $1 a month all the way up to $25 a month. They are transparent aluminum, Trellium D, Latinum, dilithium, omega molecule, and harmonized omega molecule. Each one of those tiers has its own benefits, and you can see them by visiting our Patreon page. So go check those out. There's a lot of cool stuff coming out that's available to our patrons at all the different levels. So thank you, of course, to all of the people who are supporting our network. We have over 50 patrons now and growing all the time. So we truly appreciate all of you and your contributions to the network.
Yes, we do. Thank you to each and every one of our Tricorder tribe. All right. Black alert. There will be spoilers. I think for most people, CBS spoiled this episode long ago with the big reveal of who was going to be in it. But hey, we're going to talk about it all. So if you haven't watched the episode, why are you here? Go back and watch it, then come back and join us. Our show is a general discussion about the episode, but it is segmented into 3 parts. Drop the Record, which is our opening remarks. Play a New Track, where we explore what we learned new about the Star Trek universe. And Spin It Again is a look back at standout moments, scenes, characters, anything you feel is worth a second glance. So let's go ahead and drop the record. This episode, I'll let everyone else talk about it first. I really enjoyed it. I'm excited to talk about it with all of you. Of course, we had the infamous return of Spock. Not the Spock that we know, but a Spock that I'm really excited to get to know. So, Alex, why don't you tell us what you thought about this episode?
I really liked this episode. It felt a lot like it was, this is the 7th episode of the season, so we're now halfway through, and this really felt like a turning point from the first half to the second half of the season, not just because we finally got to meet Mr. Spock himself, though granted, he didn't have a huge amount to do in this episode, but also because it felt like we were shifting from more of a footing of not really knowing what the driving story and, sort of the characters not really having a good sense of what was going on around them, to now they have a pretty good sense of what's going on, and we're pushing towards finding out some kind of answers. Now, we didn't get any of those in this episode, but it very much felt to me like this was this was the turning point, and that now the remaining 7 episodes of the season are more pushing us towards a conclusion of this story rather than continuing the build up. I really liked both of the stories, the Burnham, Spock, Sarek family story on the one hand, the on the ship timey-wimey anomaly story on the other. I thought they were pretty well balanced throughout the episode. Overall, it was really good. The one thing I do think though is because it was that kind of fulcrum point for the season, it did feel like there was a lot of setup being done in this episode. Yes, it was done in a really good way, but ultimately there wasn't a huge amount that really, except for the very end of the episode, that ultimately kind of that all that much that really happened. So it was a setup episode. It was a really good setup episode, but nonetheless, it was a setup episode for presumably the launching point for whatever the remainder of season 2 will be.
And a short one at that. I think this one was only about 40 minutes.
40 minutes, which balances out last week's episode, which I think came in at like 56.
Yeah. Wow. It shocked me because I had no idea as I was watching the episode. And what you say is right. Like while things did happen, it was definitely was that setup, and there wasn't anything else like super crucial that happened in the episode. Like it didn't move us super far, but I was entertained the whole time. And when it was over, I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm really excited to watch that again, and had no idea it was only a 40-minute episode. So for me, the pace moved along really well as well. Marina, what about you?
I completely agree with everything. For me, the fact that it was so short actually made the fact that they followed what I would call a more traditional setup of a Star Trek episode, when you actually had this separate, okay, we have the A story going on, B story, even though technically they're not A, B, these are equally important things going on, both things happening on the ship versus things happening on Vulcan. But it's sort of like, I'm like, okay, it feels a little bit flat is the wrong word. It's a bit more standard, but because of that, it's obviously makes it clear with what Alex was saying, that it's the turning point where we're finally shifting to like, okay, now we're on the path where hopefully the answers are going to be providing on all these mysteries, all these little arcs and threads that have been accumulating with every single episode so far. Because if you think about it, yeah, there's stuff happening. It feels like there's a lot, because in the back of your mind, if you have watched consistently from the beginning, there's all these question marks. You know, what's going on with the Red Angel? What's going on with Spock? What's going on with former Emperor Georgiou? And it's like on and on and on. It's like mystery, mystery, mystery. And now hopefully all of this right now, yeah, it was a short episode, but we turned and, on to Talos 4, where we'll finally have some sort of understanding what's going on with Spock, and via that, what's the Red Angel's agenda, hopefully. So it's yeah, it is a fulcrum point. I agree.
Yeah, for sure. Jeff, what do you think?
Overall, I really enjoyed this episode, despite not getting to see an awful lot of Ethan Peck's Mr. Spock. I mean, we only got some kind of muttering, Alice in Wonderland muttering, and some comatose on a gurney shots of him. But hopefully we'll get full Spock back here sometime over the next couple of episodes. And, side note, I think I'm sure everyone has seen this already. If not, you can quickly Google it. There was a really nice interview that Ethan Peck gave where he talked about what he did to prepare for the role of Spock, and the fact that he got to meet with the Nimoy family, and so I'm really optimistic about his portrayal that we're going to be seeing pretty soon. So that's really great. I feel a lot better about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's a couple other things. I mean, it's always awesome to see James Frain's Sarek back on the screen. God, he is incredible in that role. There's some great scenes that I'm sure we'll get into in a little while. He always delivers. There was a bit of interesting stuff here with Section 31, and we're getting a lot more of Section 31 than we've ever gotten before. We got that big bomb drop from Georgiou about Leland's involvement in Burnham's parents' demise. So that was pretty interesting. Another question mark, as Marina would put it, that we have to find out about later. And I think the only thing that I can come out of this episode with that I'm a little shaky on is I'm really concerned about the Talos 4 angle. I'm a little worried about that. It could be a huge retcon. I don't know what direction they're going to take it in. So I got some notes in here to talk about this a little bit later too. So I'm sure we all have theories about where that's going to go, because we actually saw Talosians in the trailer for next week. So this could get interesting.
Jeff, what did you think about the look?
Oh, I don't know. I'm still on the fence. I liked it. I thought they looked. Well, it's kind of an adjustment, because, makeup today is so much more advanced than makeup was back in the 60s. So I think they did the best they could in the 60s to make them look like they did. They do look different, but I don't know if I don't think it's too different. So, I mean, we've had to deal with multiple different versions of Klingons over the years, and we've kind of taken all of that in stride. So I don't think I'm going to be as affected by that change. I think they look interesting. I mean, we only got a quick glimpse. We're going to have to see how they talk and how they move, and, they still have the same mannerisms as the Talosians from the cage. But I guess we'll see next week.
Yeah, I agree with that, because if you think about it, so far Discovery has done, Klingons is a whole separate discussion that we probably should not get into, but they've done a wonderful re-envisioning of the Andorians, for instance. I thought that was dead on. So, like you said, it's a very quick glimpse. We don't actually see them fully, like the full stature and everything. So, with regards to that, my only sort of like if point, so to speak, is that will they actually look sort of the same frail-like statures that we saw in the original series, where they're cerebral creatures. It's all in the brain, not so much the body. So, I'm fine with the updated look. It actually looks fantastic. I mean, they got the medallions you could see and the whole bit. Let's see what, how they actually move, what's going to happen.
And the voices too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you didn't hear the voices in the trailer, I think that'll be really interesting to see what they do with those.
Mm-hmm. I agree. What about you, Heather?
Yeah, the Talosians and everything. I mean, it's one place where I care not to be critical until I see what is there. It excited me. It was, it was similar to when the Enterprise showed up at the end of last season. I got pretty that stuff, I can't help but get excited. Like, there's just certain things that, regardless of how I feel, like even seeing Spock, I could do without Spock in Discovery, but I'm so excited to have him there. So it was the same with this reveal at the end of the episode that they're going to Talos, and then seeing the Talosians, what we did. I guess I'm more excited than I am concerned, because I just don't know.
Yeah.
And go ahead, Marina.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm usually like, so far Discovery has done this several times already, with the Enterprise and the Spock and everything. And I used to be, I suppose the word would be cautiously optimistic, because, for instance, the appearance of Enterprise threw me, and I was extremely apprehensive when they said, "Okay, well, we're gonna have Spock," and I'm like, "Well, is this really necessary?" It's not so much like, oh, "Come on, it's Spock," but at the same time, I was like, "Well, how many times have we seen Spock show up at?" Look at it, series, movies, whatever. So, but every single time Discovery pulled it off beautifully. Like, we didn't have Enterprise all of a sudden overshadow the fact that it's a Discovery story. So far, Spock is extremely amazing, and like everything that I've seen so far with what Ethan Peck, what you said, like interviews and everything, and when he was on the red carpet during the second season premiere, it actually filled me with like, this is, they really did, this is very much seriously approached and carefully considered. So I'm when they flashed, okay, well, this is the coordinates of Talos 4, I was like, whoa, they're pulling another one like that. So I'm really looking forward to that now.
Yeah. When it comes to use of familiar characters, in this case, this will be an iconic character. I guess you could argue that Pike and Number One are both iconic in their own way, but we just didn't get a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
They're not characters that we know as much from television movie canon than stuff that happens in the books. But I've yet to be disappointed with anything like that, and so I don't doubt that the writers and all the creatives in Discovery, look at bringing these characters to life, or these aliens, in a way that isn't extremely A, serious, and B, respectful. Regardless of what the haters out there say, I feel that the creative team behind Discovery has been incredibly respectful of the franchise. So I don't know. I'm like Marina. I choose to be cautiously optimistic. I don't know what they're going to do with this story. I'm excited to see what's going to happen. So yeah, this episode, I was really happy to get to experience this episode, because the last several I really have struggled with. I haven't completely disliked them, but I haven't ended the episode thinking, oh, I'm really excited to watch it again. And this one did exactly that. And it was really a combination of just the fact that cinematically it moved really well. Some of these transitions were really great, especially towards the end, with going from Ariam's eye to the peak of the Section 31 ship. That was really cool.
That was awesome.
And just the story, like I said, like everything moved along really well, and I didn't feel like one story was taking me out of the other, as I have in previous episodes. And with what little we got of Spock, I loved when Amanda told Michael, Spock is not how you remember him, because that is probably the most relevant quote of the entire show. That's really speaking to us. Like right now, this is not a Spock that we remember. So yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I'm excited to dive in here to what we learned that's new. Marina, did you find anything out in this episode that you didn't know about the Star Trek universe before?
Ooh, oh, that's a tricky one. I was mostly concentrating on the relationships between, because I find it that they beautifully have these combos of characters that appear together, and that's kind of like that was probably the most in my face, so to speak, thing about this episode. So I can't really say that there was anything. Okay, this is so brand new, because all the little things that they showed kind of made sense naturally. Like we see on Vulcan. That makes sense. I mean, we always go like, oh, Vulcan is a desert planet. Aside from the fact that it does rain in the deserts, like I'm kind of glad that they're showing the fact that it's not, the planet doesn't just have one singular climate anywhere. But brand new, absolutely something that nothing comes to mind.
I mean, you can talk about stuff that we learned about characters. It doesn't necessarily have to be about Star Trek in its entirety.
Let me just throw this out there, because for me that was like right in, I hope, everybody's face, Amanda, because holy tribble, this was amazing assertiveness when she turned on Sarek and she said, I'm your partner, I'm not under your authority. That was like, and she's the one who found Spock, which is another question mark, incidentally. How did she do that? Where did she find him? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, that was like, oh, you have this one, not main character, but, a very powerful figure all of a sudden.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That's and as far as like those combos that I mentioned, I mean, Tilly and Stamets, every single time it just works beautifully. So I'm very happy that they keep coming back, even though I felt this particular episode Tilly kind of swung back into being mostly comic relief. But when she was there with Stamets, or anytime that she appears with Saru, it's a very beautiful dynamic to observe.
Yeah.
So yeah, and who else is out there that, well, Emperor Joju. Oh my God, Michelle Yeoh. I mean, it's a small wonder that she's getting a spin-off. Come on, look at her. She's just deliciously gray, because you literally, does anybody know what's up? I mean, no, you can't really figure out where is she, she's the hidden one. She's probably the biggest mystery out there, I think, much more than Spock, because we don't know what she's aiming at. With Michael, with Section 31, with anyone, she's just there, there.
Yeah, I've heard some speculation that, we're really seeing the roots of where Section 31 is going to go back into go into the dark, I guess.
And it makes beautiful sense if that's how they're going to swing it, because it kind of, it makes sense where their Section 31 just and disappears by the time Deep Space Nine comes along.
Yeah. But I mean, both the scenes with Amanda and Sarek, I mean, so many of my women friends have been tweeting about Amanda the Fierce from this episode, and just getting to see her really the way that the exposure that we've had to Amanda in Discovery has really moved from her being somewhat subservient, although still stoic and motherly, but subservient to Sarek. And at this point, she's really had it. Like, we've started to see shades of that, especially the last time that we saw her when she left Michael to find Spock on her own. But I just absolutely adored this scene with Amanda and Sarek, because not only did I see, a woman displaying her agency, Sarek's reaction was, he didn't have a negative reaction. It felt like a very healthy interaction to me.
Yes.
And then by the end of it, we get this, emotional response from him that he is not prepared to lose both of his children on the same day. And that moment between the two of them was just like, wow, I think we have, a relationship in Star Trek that shows, both sides, respecting each other, being able to have a disagreement or an argument, but still respecting each other and loving each other and loving their family. And so that was nice to see. And then Tilly and Stamets for sure. And maybe I'll save that till the end of the episode for a different segment. But Alex, what about you? Did you take away anything new from this episode?
I think you put it so well about the Sarek family and about Amanda finally demonstrating some agency in this episode. I think in all of her previous appearances in the Star Trek franchise, going all the way back to Journey to Babel, she was always been a character who, while a great character, was very much in service to whatever the mission of Sarek was at that point. And this is really the first time we've seen a depiction of these two characters where their objectives do not line up and the interactions between them as a result. And so it was super nice to see Amanda stand up to Sarek and frankly give a very honest depiction of what it's like to be in that kind of relationship, right? I mean, which one of any of the relationships that we've ever had have ever worked like that, right? They just don't. It's always a give and take. And this was demonstrating a more honest portrayal of what a marriage between two strong figures like this could be. And I actually would really like to kind of push further and continue to get to know Amanda even better, right? We know that she's, is very protective of her family, very protective of Spock and of Burnham, but I would like to know more about who Amanda was before she met Sarek, for example, and before she really came to be defined by that relationship. The other thing I thought was really interesting in this episode was the revelation that Spock had a learning disability when he was a child, which was sort of which was very new to the character. I think puts a really interesting spin on the character. I actually kind of like it because I think it goes to show that even a character that we have understood to have been, as close to perfection as you can possibly get when it comes to intelligence and just being able to quote unquote get it, had a number of challenges that he had to overcome to get to that point. And I think also kind of shows that we should never be too careful. We can never be too careful in terms of not reading into too much about somebody's history based on what we've seen of them, that you never really know what kind of challenges anybody is going through or has gone through. And so I thought it was a really interesting kind of added dimension to the character that I really liked.
Yeah, I'm curious to talk about this. Jeff, it sounds like you have some feedback.
I think I'm on the opposite side of this issue. Alex made some great points, though, so I'm not going to. I don't want to take away from anything that you said, Alex, because I think you may be looking at this the right way. I was kind of looking at this as I'm all for retcons. I'm open to retcons, but I really wasn't sure what the purpose of this retcon was. If it was just a mechanism to explain why Amanda read Alice in Wonderland to Spock, I wasn't sure. I mean, we already know that Spock had to overcome a lot of adversity, with his biracial nature. acceptance from his own people, acceptance from humans and from other people on other alien races and things. I wasn't sure what the purpose of adding that to the character was, and maybe you guys have more insight into that than I do. It just kind of just felt out of left field to me and potentially unnecessary.
I'm glad that you have this opposing viewpoint, because my partner also had an issue with this. And it's so it as I watched it, I just thought, oh, that's really nice. It's representation first and foremost, I think, and I think that Spock is a great character. It makes sense to me that he may have struggled with a learning disability when he was young. And I know it's completely out of left field and something absolutely new about this character. And I think that my partner would say that he felt they just used it to basically explain the numbers and why he was reading the numbers the wrong way. And where the only place that I struggle, because I think Discovery has done a phenomenal job of continuing the tradition of representation in Star Trek. That is a foundation of what Star Trek is, and showing all people of the world and the universe. And so I don't mind Discovery carrying on that tradition, and I'm a big proponent of, if it helps one person, then it's worth it to me. It hasn't hurt the character in any way for me. However, my partner struggled with it for the same reasons, and we had a little discussion just about dyslexia. And dyslexia is different for everyone who experiences it. It's not just one homogenous learning disability. My ex-husband had dyslexia, so I understand how it works. It doesn't necessarily work in like seeing mirror images or mirror images of a number. So it would have made more sense if it was just some numbers were switched around and not entirely mirror backwards. But maybe there are people that do experience it that way. So my nitpick basically was just the how they portrayed it versus more of the reality of what I know, but my reality could be different from other people. Marina, did you have any feedback on this?
Well, my opinion was mostly what you just said. Actually, it didn't hurt the character, which is why I kind of like it. First, I'm like my eyebrow went up, and I'm like, well, okay. It really didn't provide anything that radically changed or added to the character.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, I can totally see how that it could have been out there in his childhood, that it just never comes up. Well, for us going forward, being in the original series, TNG, etc. So it didn't ruffle any feathers. Let's put it this way. It's like, okay, now it's just there. We know that he had this condition. And as far as how it gets presented, I mean, yes, I suppose in real life, in terms of what people that actually have dyslexia experience in the world, in this case, I mean, they're describing it as, it could have been the Vulcan condition. For all we know, they're experiencing it exactly that way. It's a mirror images.
So on that, I did not interpret the mirror image of the coordinates being a tie-in to his learning disability. I took that as a tie-in to Alice in Wonderland, or I guess to one of the sequel novels, Alice Through the Looking Glass, which is where Alice goes through a mirror and finds and enters a world in which everything is reversed. They did not really...
Okay.
They didn't really kind of connect the dots together on that.
It was a really quick
and
moment.
There is a line that Burnham gives that she basically swallows that I've now watched 2 times, and I still can't figure out exactly what it is that she says. But my interpretation of that line wasn't that he was giving the numbers backwards because it was an expression of his earlier disability, but that he was giving the numbers backwards. He basically scrambled them in code because he wanted Burnham and only Burnham to figure out
that kind of
what the solution was.
Great idea.
There was a very brief bit of dialogue when Sarek comes in and sees Spock. He says he's regressing. Like, it was just one little couple words, but I think that was what they meant, to have you connect the dots between the learning disability and the codes, because Sarek is recognizing that Spock is kind of going back to his previous, prior to whatever he's been through and what he's become. That's why he's a quote unquote different Spock. He's gone back to this other state. But that's what I took from it.
Well, regardless, I think that all of this has just been very enlightening, because I didn't look at it that way at all, Alex. So I really appreciate that perspective.
Yeah.
Because I was just looking at literally about the learning disorder.
Well, and the episode doesn't make it clear. So I think both interpretations are perfectly valid based on the source.
I was just about to say that it's actually very nicely ties in together, because he knew about Alice in Wonderland precisely because of the learning disability, because his mother read him the book to make sure that he was actually able to read. So yeah, that how it all ties in together, both of the explanations actually.
Yep. Okay, are we on, Jeff?
I think we are.
Yep. Okay.
Well, the Spock's learning disability was the first one on my list, but I have a couple of other things. So, Leland having something to do with the death of Burnham's parents is new. I thought that was a strange and interesting throwaway in there that they throw in, wow, wait a minute, wait, what? I didn't see that coming at all.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious to find out what that is. He played some sort of a role in that Klingon attack, so I'm sure we'll find out more about that, but I thought that was an interesting injection. And one thing that every Starfleet officer should have from now on until the end of time is an injection of tardigrade DNA, so that they'll be immune to temporal anomalies and time warps. So I thought that, the revelation that having tardigrade DNA makes you immune to any time effects was mind-blowing. So why doesn't everybody have it now? Let's just immunize everybody. Interesting. And I like the bringing in of the Vulcan ritual of Takmar, and we see Sarek is trying desperately to communicate with Spock. I don't know how much of Takmar we've gotten prior to this. I'm not an expert on every Star Trek episode ever made.
This was new.
Yeah, I thought it might be.
It had not cropped up before.
Okay, I thought it was new because I don't remember ever hearing about it before. But I like that there are more Vulcan abilities that we are yet unknown of. So I thought I liked the fact that they put that in there. And it was a very sweet thing to see that Sarek was in a non-emotional way trying to use this ritual to find his son. So that was a pretty cool addition.
Yeah. Go ahead, Alex.
Jeff, you brought up the Leland Burnham family thing, and that actually was one of the things about the episode that I didn't really love. The show has trouble with allowing the tension between characters to come from the interactions that we see on screen. It feels like everybody's got to have some history or connection to each other that goes back in time, the Burnham Lorca relationship being a prime example of a relationship that just kind of it doesn't pop out of nowhere because they knew it existed beforehand, but things like that to me make the universe feel much smaller, that you can't just meet people and have experiences with them and have those be negative experiences and therefore go, gee, I really don't like that guy, and have the tension between the characters generated that way. There always has to be this no, but 20 years ago you were involved, you were somehow involved in the death of my family. Given everything we've seen about the interactions between Starfleet and Section 31 up to this point, you don't need you were involved in the death of my parents piece of it to drive the tension between the characters. There's plenty there to work with already. So there was just one. I'm very curious to see how it shakes out. And it was one throwaway line in this episode so far, but it's one of those things where it makes the universe feel smaller. And Discovery certainly, especially given the way that people just seem to get around the galaxy at the click of a fingers, they're already doing a lot to make this feel like a small universe, and it just doesn't help that all of these characters have backstories that overlap and cross each other at some point down the line.
Did you want to say anything, Jeff, or you're good?
No, great points, and I didn't think about it that way, but Alex brings up an interesting point of all of these seemingly remote interconnections that so many of these characters have, and it just winds up. I don't know if it becomes too convenient after a while that everyone has something in their history that links them to another character on the show. I don't think we've had this to any great extent in previous Star Trek series, so maybe it's just a new thing that's part of the serial storytelling, and the way these writers are writing these stories in comparison to the way they used to be written. I don't know. It's some of it seems too convenient. Some of it seems to be like, oh, here we go again. But there are some interesting ones, and I don't know necessarily how I feel about this particular one. I guess I'm gonna have to see how they play this out over the course of the rest of the season. But I mean, hopefully it's not something that's too contrived.
Hopefully, because I have to say that this particular thing didn't feel like, oh, it's a new thing that we figured out, that, especially that particular, the Leland and Burnham parents. Believe it or not, I actually thought they're like, okay, that makes perfect sense. Maybe it's the way that scene was when he's talking to her when Spock is about to be basically lobotomized while she doesn't know about it. There's something about, I mean, Leland was specifically sent for Spock, so there is some sort of connection there already. And then when Georgiou said, you're responsible for her parents' death, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. So there you go. But like you said, hopefully the explanation is going to be more or less reasonable, unless. But so far they've done. I mean, like I said, all these multiple threads that they keep adding to this, so far they've been pretty good in terms of resolving it.
Yeah,
we shall see.
It's things like this that kind of make me wish we could focus on other things instead. Like I don't know. I don't need Burnham's parents' death explained at all.
Yeah.
That was
It's
never
kind of
a question.
Soap opera-y, isn't it?
For whatever it is, like I am more curious to find out. And again, I'm also one of those people who would have preferred a Discovery without Section 31. But since it's there, I'm more curious to just kind of find out what happens with Leland and Georgiou, and how we assume maybe Georgiou kind of rises to power within Section 31, which again, we've kind of seen the seeds or the roots of here. But I'd be more excited just to delve into that, or go back to things like Tyler and Voq, which I am still so confused about. We still have not gotten we've gotten more Tyler than we have L'Rell this season. But I think that there's still so much ambiguity with the character of Ash Tyler. And I think that is really a product of all the chaos behind the scenes and what they were attempting to do with him and L'Rell and Voq. My understanding, back when L'Rell used her magic gloves to take Voq out of Tyler, she said that Voq was gone. And the viewer is supposed to assume that Voq is dead, but at that point we didn't trust L'Rell. So I was like, yeah, she said he's gone, but who's to say he's actually gone? So then, in Point of Light, L'Rell and Voq, Voq is struggling with this Klingon identity, and at first he's trying to identify as Klingon and wants her to call him his Klingon name and all this stuff. And then it changes, and he flat out says, Voq is gone, like, I can't be Voq, but I can create a new love story with you. So at that point, I was like, all right, so Voq is really gone. All that we have are these memories that Tyler remembers. And then in this episode, I appreciated that Pike called out again the fact that Tyler killed, one of Discovery's crew members. And he did say, or your shadow did. And then Ash Tyler came back and said, we can't, there's nothing we can do about him, or sorry, but there's no way to get rid of him, sir, meaning Voq. How does that make sense? I need help understanding what that means, because Voq is gone. Is he referring to Voq as a being? Is he referring to the memory of Voq in this? and that we can't just forget that Voke killed Culber. I don't, help me make sense of this, because I'm really struggling with understanding why this is happening. Like, aside from the debate on whether Tyler should be held accountable for all this, which came up in an episode I don't think I was on, but I just don't understand why we're even talking about Voke anymore like he's a person.
Yeah, I thought it was more metaphorical. Precisely that, this thing happened while he was under the influence for all intents and purposes. And, it's not like he can just cancel out what has been done, the murder and everything. And
so just metaphorically.
Yeah, I think it's metaphorical. And whether he can be held accountable or not, that's a big question, because you can see, in the preview for next week's episode that he and Culber are fighting. So hopefully that will get some sort of resolution as far as that part.
Yeah, maybe
not so much about as far as what is actually helping with Culber himself. That's a whole separate thing.
Yeah, maybe this is a foreshadow or setup for next week. I don't want to go into the whole debate of who can be held accountable and etc. I just struggle, because I really like the character of Ash Tyler, and I think he deserves to be fleshed out more than he really is. I appreciated the arc between him and Pike, although it is a place in this episode and in Discovery where we were just talking about sometimes like it's a little too easy, and this was a little too easy for me, because the setup, they're going into it, and Pike and Tyler are at odds, and of course by the end of everything, now Pike, and I mean, this is who Pike is, I guess. I think he gives everyone a fair shot for the most part, so I guess Tyler just had to prove himself to Pike to get Pike to listen and consider that the Red Angel is hostile. I don't know. I guess we'll just see what happens next week, and I won't drag out stuff about Ash Tyler. Other things that I had down that we learned, aside from basic relevant stuff like, the probe went into the future and came back with all this interesting. Okay, so Giorgio. Towards the end of the episode, Burnham runs into Giorgio. They're in the hallway on the ship, and Giorgio is, telling her to take Spock, and Burnham says, "So you're telling me this out of the goodness of your heart?" And Giorgio says, "No, the goodness of yours. I know so much more about you than you can imagine, but that's for another time." So, like, when I watched that scene, I was thinking, oh, well, maybe she's just talking about how she knew Mirror Burnham in that way. But it seems like perhaps this is another place where Giorgio actually does know stuff about Michael. Is it related to what she knows from Leland, or what could that be? But that was a new little revelation that I'm excited to see where that leads.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. I was wondering if she was referring to her knowledge of Mirror Burnham, since they had such a close relationship, and she was kind of projecting what she knew of Mirror Burnham onto Prime Burnham. Wasn't really sure, but that's kind of where I was going with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's what I thought. But then the more I thought about it, the less I felt it was just a reference to Mirror Burnham, and that it's an intentional reference to things she actually knows about Prime Burnham. I don't know. I guess we'll just see.
Yeah, I think that's one of those ones where it will be revealed over the course of the season whether that was a line that had a particular weight to it, or whether it was a line that was like, I helped raise you, therefore I know you better. The mirror version of you, therefore I know you.
Right.
I think it could very much go in either direction at this moment, because it definitely seems like Giorgio has an agenda that sits a little separately from the Section 31 agenda. It's clear that there are certain elements of that agenda that overlap, but she also clearly is working on a bit of a plan of her own, which could be as simple as become the leader of Section 31, or could be a bit deeper than that. And that's actually one of the things I think is really interesting about this season, is how this character arc kind of plays into the events of it, and ultimately what does Giorgio want and what is she trying to accomplish? And those are two really interesting questions that I'm excited to figure out the answers to.
So I know we don't get a lot into kind of super deep speculation on the show. We try not to do it as much, but what I had thought was I was trying to think about what it seemed obvious to me that Giorgio was trying to get Burnham on the hook for owing her something by helping her get Spock out of there and taking a beating and all of that. And my mind kind of went to, I'm surprised, like you look at the actions of Mirror Lorca and all the things that he had to do to orchestrate his getting back home. And I was really shocked that Mirror Giorgio isn't doing the same thing. And I'm wondering if this is her long game to hook Burnham into helping her somehow utilize Discovery to get her back to the Mirror Universe. I know it's a long shot. It was just kind of my mental ramblings, but that's kind of what I was thinking of.
Anything can happen is what I've learned with Discovery, for sure. So let's go ahead and move it into Spin It Again and talk about what we think deserves a little extra special attention. Who do I start with now? Sorry, I lost track. Are we back to Alex to start or Marina?
I can start. Well, let's see. What else? My little notes here. I keep going back. I made myself a little list that I keep adding. All those question marks, all the mystery. Basically, well, for starters, something that hasn't been addressed at all ever since we're still, the Discovery is still in orbit of Kaminar. What's going on there? That was a very nice, almost standalone episode, but it's like, okay, we just dropped off. Even though we're still sort of in the vicinity, nobody knows what's going on with the bowl and the ships and the little revolution that Saru has staged, and well, Saru himself. It's I'm kind of hoping that it's not just okay, done deal, and then we move on. That this whole thing has to be addressed somehow. At least how it affected Saru, because he's obviously not behaving like he did before anymore. Emperor Giorgio we touched upon, because that is, for me, that's the biggest mystery, because it's completely unclear which way the character is heading, moving, whatever. The Red Angel. Again, this is, as we said, a pivot episode, so I'm kind of hoping that with arrival to Talos 4, that part will start to unravel, more, and we'll actually start heading towards like what's going on, because that's the driving force of the entire season. We keep moving along because all this red lights popping up all over the galaxy. Speaking of red lights, for me, the biggest what's going on there moment was actually when this whole thing with Commander Ariam happened, with the 3 lights that blinked in her eye. Something happened at that moment. Is she now carrying a virus? What's going on out there? Anybody has any ideas? I'm assuming everybody noticed that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm just assuming the same thing you did, that somehow the alien future technology infected her with something.
So what else to be on the lookout for? Well, Spock and Burnham arc will continue, so that's actually not been something worth mentioning as a special item. But another thing is Culber. That's also another hanging thread that obviously was not part of the last episode, but it's something that has to pop up, which I'm assuming is going to be touched upon in the next episode, as we could see from the preview. But they started kind of very nicely, showing that, again, he's not himself, probably has the post-traumatic disorder of some sorts, and where they're going to take it. Is he going to go back to being our Dr. Culber? Is he basically a completely new man? On top of my head, these are the sort of things that are hanging out there. But the more immediate one, I wanted to see what's going to happen with those 3 lights blinking in Commander Ariam's eyes.
Yeah, that was creepy. I've heard some people think that she's the Red Angel. I've really heard it all at this point, I think, and I don't even know where to go myself anymore. So I'm just, it feels like the lottery. Like somebody that has a speculation is going to be right? Like it would be a feat if
But I have noticed that a lot of the discussions deteriorated mostly into humor. Like over the last, people have been discussing who is the Red Angel, and it's everything from Sir Patrick wearing a lobster suit to
Yeah.
that was my favorite. To oh my god, the Facebook has been mostly just doing it for laughs, I think.
An evolved Tribble.
Yeah, and I'm kind of fine. Just kind of sit back. I'm like, you know what? Right now, I don't want to, because I tried to have my own theories in the last season with everything was going on. Some of the stuff I did guess. Other stuff was like, oh, I did not see this coming a mile away completely. And so I'm kind of sitting back, and please take me there. I'm looking forward to seeing what you're going to come up with.
Yeah, I've not tried to pay too much attention to theories because I just don't want to know what it is. I was disappointed with CBS and revealing that like Culber was going to be back in that episode, and why they chose to do that, I will never figure out. And essentially did the same thing with Spock, but I kind of feel like once they put it on their preview for next week, like it's out there, and they want to do that to entice viewers, I guess. We had all kind of figured out story-wise and everything that Spock was going to be in this episode, but I just try to stay away because again, like last year, I felt like we all were just waiting for what we pretty much knew was going to happen, and I'd rather tag along for the ride like I am with the Red Angel. Alex, do you have any shout-outs?
Before I get to that, I'll just say I totally agree with you. The decision to put the reveal that Culber was returning in the episode preview was utterly baffling. I wrote the review for Tricorder that week, so I had access to the episode like a week prior. So I was watching it with no idea what was going to happen. And actually, it was a really, really powerful moment because it hadn't clicked for me until the moment that he appeared on screen.
Yeah.
That this was going to be the episode that he came back. And granted, I tend not to be very smart at sort of anticipating a lot of this stuff, so I may still have been in the minority. But it seemed like a odd choice just to tell everybody in advance, yeah, this is the one he comes back, because it's the big twist of the episode. This one I didn't feel so much about that because I felt like they had overdone the kind of Spock teasing, and I was just kind of really ready for him to arrive. And we did kind of meet him in the first sort of 5-10 minutes of the episode, so it wasn't spoiling too far ahead.
Yeah.
But in terms of other things that stood out for me with this episode, we talked a little bit about Burnham Georgiou, but I really liked the fight scene that they had, especially that moment when Georgiou tells Burnham to punch her, and before she's really even finished saying the sentence, Burnham just goes and just fully punches her right in the chest. And the look of both shock and respect on that Michelle Yeoh kind of portrayed in as Georgiou in that moment made me laugh. It was a really funny moment, and I think intentionally so. And there have been Michelle Yeoh was just so good. So the Ken Riley, the Tricorder editor, has been doing these little GIFs after the episodes of kind of little moments. And there are a bunch of little moments from that fight that you kind of don't see in the sort of very kinetic, propulsive moments of the episode. But when you see them just in a little GIF, like a little look or a glance, or just a certain way of moving that actually is really is clearly really intentional, and B is just so well done. I have grown to like that character more and more, and become much more invested in where things are headed. I guess we'll see on the Red Angel, right? So we know there's some tie-in to 500 years in the future, which puts it in the 28th century. The only thing we know about the 28th century is that is the origin point for Future Guy from Enterprise. But I don't think this is a temporal Cold War tie-in. Though it would be a really interesting choice if they decided to do it. I think they are sort of telling their own story independent of that. But we have no idea where they're going, right? As Marina said, there's 1,000 different theories out there, and I guess one of them, just by the law of very large numbers, must ultimately be right. Because if there's 1,000 out there, the likelihood that one of them is true is pretty high. But it doesn't feel like the first season when we had a pretty good idea from that very first appearance of Ash Tyler that he was actually Vogue. And other people, though I admit not me, I was totally suckered by this one, were convinced that Lorca was from the Mirror Universe, going all the way back to kind of episode 5 or 6, because Jonathan Frakes had let slip that we would be visiting the Mirror Universe later in the season. So we had a pretty good sense of what the beats of the season were going to be, and we're kind of just watching to see how when those beats materialized. But this season, I couldn't tell you what's going to happen in the last 7 episodes of the season. I mean, the only thing I know is that from the preview, we end up at Talos 4, which I think is another really interesting thing about the end of the episode. Burnham, Talos 4 is mentioned, but the computer doesn't say anything, and Burnham doesn't seem to know it. So the General Order 7, which is from the Menagerie, and the death penalty for visiting Talos 4. I think we might be about to see the origin for General Order 7.
Interesting theory.
Yeah, and that it will turn out that was not as a result of the events of the cage, which always seemed really weird to me, because it didn't seem like the events of that episode necessarily warranted the death penalty of all things. I mean, certainly this is early season 1 Star Trek, so they hadn't necessarily really established the kind of laws and norms of who and what the Federation were. And so that's the kind of production reason for it. But I'd be really interested. I'm really interested to see if they are planning to kind of come up with a deeper, more kind of 21st century convincing reason, and also 21st century Star Trek convincing reason why the death penalty would be in place for visiting this particular planet. And if it's tied into kind of universe altering, timeline screwing events, I think that puts a much more weight behind it than just there's an alien race there who you probably don't want to go messing with. It was a great episode, and I am really, really excited for next Thursday's episode to see how all this starts to shake out.
Yeah, I actually had this in my my Spin It Again section as well, to kind of ponder the Talos 4 angle of this. So, timeline wise, so Burnham and Spock visiting Talos 4 will be about 3 to 4 years after the events of the cage. And kind of going by the timeline, since the Enterprise visited in 2254, and I think we're somewhere post 2257 in season 2. So I think season 1 was 2256 to 2257 according to the timeline. So this is obviously post the cage, but before General Order 7. So yeah, I completely agree, Alex. And maybe this is going to be a place where they kind of shoehorn in a retcon in the real reason for General Order 7 being issued. Now, something I'm interested to see how Pike reacts to knowing that Spock is going back there after what transpired with him on the planet. And I guess more wild conspiracy theories. Is this actually going to change Pike's future? Is something going to happen that alters what originally happened to Captain Pike? I don't know. I guess it's possible that we could see, Pike go on to a future that is different than what we know of his Prime Universe future. So no beeping wheelchair, maybe.
I think there would be a lot of angry people if they changed anything in that way.
There's angry people all the time. We live in a world of angry people.
This is true. I don't know. We'll see. Mm-hmm. Oh gosh. So my things, they're all like little random things that I wanted to just touch on, which I guess this one could have been mentioned earlier, but the line where Burnham and Georgiou are walking down the hall, and Burnham asks, or Georgiou says something about her mother, and Burnham's like, "Did you kill her?" And Georgiou said, "It's a blur." Like, oh my God, it was just a a sinister but funny moment.
And she had several of these. I mean, when she was eating apple in the previous episode, or the making this sound in response to Burnham saying, "Are you back to the snake pit?" Like all the time, they have this just kind of like mic drops for Georgiou every time she appears.
I also just continue to adore Pike. In the very beginning of this episode, we had a scene with Tilly and I think Saru on the bridge, and Tilly said like freaking amazing or something.
Yep.
And then Saru called her out, was like Tilly or something. And Tilly, says that she learned that she should not curse on duty. And Pike comes in saying, let's determine more about this possible power source beyond freaking amazing. Like, he accepts his crew for who they are. I feel like, he respects them with all their quirks and eccentricities and their problems. And I just really admire that about him. And then that kind of, that carried over also with his scenes with Tyler and how that worked out. I had to send a nod to Captain Saru, who was acting captain while Pike was gone, and that moment where he turned their mission from research to rescue.
Oh, yes.
Despite the fact that this is a different Saru that we're seeing, that Saru was still familiar because I felt like that's the Captain Saru that we have been seeing all along. And then I think my final shout out scene, aside from Amanda, because this was just where my notes, Amanda the powerhouse is what I called her in my notes. I just absolutely loved getting to see this side of Amanda and to continue to see her just be amazing. So that was one of my main shout outs. And then the other was certainly this scene between Tilly and Stamets. We haven't gotten a lot of Stamets this season, but I really enjoyed this scene between the two of them, where he tells her to trust the math. More importantly, trust yourself. I wouldn't let just anyone beat me in and out of time. That was just a really great scene, and I continue to appreciate the friendship that they have, and I'm glad we got to see a little bit more of that. And yeah, small shout out to little Michael and little Spock. I like the scene where they did their LLAP hands together. It was super cute. I don't know how I feel about baby Spock. He's just so like, he's cute, but I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
The Tilly freaking moment definitely felt like a winking fourth wall acknowledgement of the furore surrounding her F word last season, which I thought was just a really cute moment.
They're doing an amazing job, they being the writers, and calling out a lot of the criticisms that they've received, and I just give them props for that, because the people who are watching Discovery and enjoying Discovery and stand with Discovery, I think, get a kick out of it and enjoy it. So I'm always happy when we get to see little things like that. So yeah, I guess I'm really excited for this next episode. I can't wait to see what happens. And yeah, I guess that's it. Did we want to go around and do any final thoughts? I kind of feel like everybody kind of shared their final thought with their spin it again.
Yeah, I got everything out.
All right, so let's just go around the table and let everyone know where to find us. Feel free to also mention your show, since we're all family here on the Tricorder Transmissions Network. So Alex, where can we find you on social media?
You can find me personally at Alexander T. Perry on Twitter, and you can find my show, Weekly Trek, at Weekly Trek.
Excellent. And Marina, where can we find you?
Marina Kravchuk. You can find me on Facebook and on Twitter as well. Handle is Dracorex, DRAKKOREX. And I'm one of the co-hosts of Shore Leave, your Star Trek Convention community podcast, which could be found on Twitter as well at Shore Leave.
Excellent. And Jeff, where can we find you?
I am Warp Factor Jeff on Twitter, and you can find me in the, I'll say it slowly this time, Heather, unofficial Star Trek Las Vegas convention group on Facebook.
That is amazing. It just cracks me up how you go over it so quickly. I mean, after what, like 5, 6, 7 years, I don't know how many years now we're at this. And you especially have been at this being a founding member. You've just got it down to an art.
Thanks for X-Men power. It's an X-Men power.
I am LLA Posper on Twitter. I am also tweeting spoilery tweets, not all the time, but sometimes when I get the chance to over at Oh My Starships. So if you don't want Discovery spoilers within the first few days, please don't follow that account. That is specifically what it's for. You've been warned. The show is at Disco_Trek. The network is at Tricorder Show. That is the gateway to get to all of our Tricorder shows. There are too many to count. I can't even right now. There's like 9, 10, a million.
I think we have 12
more in production. There's so much happening with our network, which is wonderful and amazing. We are the tricordertransmissions.com and then patreon.com, the Tricorder Transmissions. We hope that you will consider joining our Tricorder tribe. I, in particular, have started doing some side panels that aren't even necessarily open to only Patreons. I've done that just for everybody. But it gives you a good idea of what a Patreon roundtable is like as well. So feel free to check that out. We have DiscoTrek. It's the women, a look at women representation in DiscoTrek, and that should be dropping in the next month at least, hopefully sooner than that. But in the meantime, we will see you next week. As Captain Pike likes to say, we are always in a fight for the future. So we'll see you in the future.